Father, thank you so much for the chance to get together, and Father, help us to understand that by understanding who we are, we better understand who you are, because we're created in your likeness and your image. Father, the world has greatly perverted and distorted the image of who we are, and as a result, we become either ignorant or apathetic about who you are. Father, help us to better understand who you are, and through this class be able to gain a better understanding of what we should be and what you designed us to be and what you created us to be. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. We're on page 18. I'm going to go rather quickly through a lot of these, only because they're only kind of a cursory background for helping you to understand more of where Freud and Darwin and Skinner and Nietzsche and Sartre, all those ended up. That'll be on the end of this particular session that we look at them a little more in depth. But I would like somebody to read that first paragraph on page 18 that begins, "Since the dawn of human history." If someone would read that.
Since the dawn of human history, humans have exhibited contrary qualities: good and evil, love and hate, strength and weakness, kindness and cruelty, aggressivity and passivity, generosity and greed, courage and cowardice. We seem part angel, part demon, part rational and part animal, capable of great glory and great tragedy, yet incapable of seeing the nothing from which we were made, and the infinite in which we are swallowed up. Having a sense of eternity in our hearts, but confined by temporal and spatial constraints, we seek to understand ourselves both individually and as a species. What is our nature? What is the enigma called human? Who are we?
That's the quote. Yep, who are we? That's a quote that I think helps to better understand why there's been so much confusion over the last 2.5 millennia about what it means to be human. The scriptures are real clear that we're created in God's likeness and God's image, but that image is tainted. We'll look more at that in the next session that we're going to have next Friday. Remember that this is the 5th Friday, and we'll start with the first Friday in the fireside room. We have that for the foreseeable future, but that'll be next Friday. We'll look at what God says we are. I want to really start out by looking at several different philosophers and what they have to say. More, I'd like to take a look at Blaise Pascal right in the middle of page 18. If someone would read that, that would kind of help us to better understand why these philosophers are searching so hard.
Man possesses the greatest grandeur of any created thing, and yet at the same time displays the greatest misery. Man is so great he can contemplate his own future and his own existence, but in the process of doing that, he realizes that he is not enjoying what he knows is the best possible life.
It seems to be that the book of Ecclesiastes says that the more our knowledge, the more our misery. Mm-hmm. Why would that be the case? The smarter we get, the more we understand the world, the more we understand ourselves, the more miserable we are.
We know how we failed in life.
Okay, we know how we failed.
We suddenly realize we can never know everything.
Whoa! We start to understand our own limitations, and the more we know, the more we know we don't know.
Yep. We know things are supposed to be better than what we're living in.
I think that's huge. We understand that things should be better than they are, but they're not better. Please keep that on the back burner, because that's going to play out over the next several classes that we have. One of the things that Blaise Pascal is really, really good at doing. Do you all know who Blaise? I know Lacey knows who Blaise Pascal is. Do you know who Blaise Pascal is? Lacey, you want to tell us a little bit of what you know about Blaise Pascal?
So he's a French philosopher, I believe in the 1600s, added a lot to the theory of calculus and probability, and was just a really great thinker who spent a lot of his time thinking that he put in the things called the Penses.
Whoa, very good. Wow. Gave a lot more information than I was hoping for. Yeah, Penses is basically his thoughts on what it means to be human and what it means to be a Christian as a human. And he was a genius. Several of our math theorems and formulas are from Blaise Pascal, so he was a genius, but more than just a mathematic genius. He thought about human condition a lot, and so understood human brokenness probably better than most of us, because I think he was a genius and had a better understanding, comprehensive understanding of how broken we really are. One of the things that I point out here, like the third and last quote here, in my 68 years of ministry, one of the things that I've struggled the most in getting people convinced of is the brokenness of human nature. In fact, I just came across this in the last week or so. A person was praying and basically praying, help us to work with the children, and because they're so innocent and they're so clean, and to help us to be able to encourage them in their spotlessness and in their purity. And I was going,
What kids are you working with?
yeah.
Aliens.
Why is it evident that kids are not born spotless and pure and clean?
Born in sin.
Well, the scriptures say we're all born in sin, but what physical evidence do we have that's definitely the case?
Exhibit A.
Oh, no.
Selfish.
Christy, what is there about that child that helps you to understand its sinfulness?
The baby wants what the baby wants.
I don't know of any parent that taught their baby to cheat. But you can watch 9-month-olds cheat. I never heard of any parent teaching their kids to lie. But I get it all the time. If you catch them at something, they have a million excuses that they can create for why they didn't do it. They didn't get that from somebody teaching it to them. They got it instinctively from their sinful, fallen nature. They don't have to be taught. They don't have to be taught to shift blame. They don't have to be taught to do all sorts of selfish, greedy things. They just do it. Thoughts. Moving ahead, early Greek philosophers on page 19. Plato looked at man as a featherless biped. I thought that was always entertaining. Aristotle looked at man as a rational animal. Hobbes at the bottom thought of man as a machine. I remember in high school we had a cross-country runner. His name was Morales, Joe Morales. And we called him the machine. Now, was he a machine? No. Why would we call a cross-country runner a machine?
Because you could keep on running.
Yes, he was like the Energizer Bunny. He would start at a certain pace and he never wavered the entire 2.5 miles. That's what cross-country was when I was in high school. It was amazing. He never wavered. Up hills, same pace. Downhill, same pace. Didn't matter what the conditions were, same pace. You just crank him up, shoot the gun, there he went. And we always were trying to catch him. Because he was a machine. Now, he was not a machine. But he ran like a machine. And unfortunately, some of these analogies that philosophers have promoted over the years have been taken to great extremes so that people actually think we're machines now. And that there's no difference between us and AI. Folks, there's a huge difference between us and AI. Although AI can simulate human behavior very, very, very convincingly. But it's not the same. Thoughts. We'll get into that a year from now. Going on. Schopenhauer, I'm not going to spend any time there. Kierkegaard. Kierkegaard gets a bad rap. A lot of people think that he was in far left field because he promoted the idea of relativism. But his relativism wasn't the same as what we've extracted it to be now. His relativism was that truth has to be relative in order for us to be personal. If truth is just a proposition out there and never internalized and made relative to our own being, then it's just some empty proposition that doesn't mean anything. And so Kierkegaard was living in a cold Danish church. He was a Danish philosopher and looked at the cold heartless and non-emotional worship that was going on and said, this is not truth. Truth should affect us. Now, today relativism is taken to a whole different extreme, but Kierkegaard, I believe, with all my heart, wanted it to go internally. And one of the things that he had to say was in this quote on the top of page 21, second paragraph down. Kierkegaard believed that men had not become fully human. They had not reached full personhood. They were not, as he termed it, individuals. To be fully human means to be an individual, a self with integrity, passion, freedom. Men do not truly exist. Their existence only approaches and falls more or less short of what it could be and what it ought to be. That's where I think he really internalized his religion and fought to try to make sure that everybody understood that as well. I don't believe, I think Kierkegaard is right. I don't believe we're fully human until we've had that personalization of truth. Does that make sense at all? The gospel has to mean something to us. We can say Jesus died on a cross, or we can say Jesus died on a cross for me. And there's a world of difference between the two, because one is just a proposition out there, and the other one has been internalized where it actually moves me and changes me. And that's where Kierkegaard thought that truth has to be changing us, or you're not truly human, you're not fully alive. Thoughts? Okay.
Makes sense.
Rousseau was an idiot. Jacques Rousseau believed that man was naturally good, and that it was only societal, governmental, religious influences that corrupted humans. Rousseau's view of life and the human condition are still active in shaping trends, cultures, perspectives, worldviews today. It's exactly where most people are. Why can we not say it's only organizations or governments or religion that's corrupting people, and that people are born pure, and it's only the outside influences that corrupt them? Why can we not say that?
What's that?
Well, that's one place.
People make up those things.
Yes! People make up the organizations. People make up the religions. People make up the government.
Yeah.
And it has to start somewhere. And it started in the fall in the garden, in Genesis chapter 3. Thoughts?
Chicken and the egg.
Well, there's a big thing to contemplate as well.
But if you truly believe that, then every person would either be evil or every person would either be good. Because every person is controlled under the government and all the other influences.
Oh, sure.
So that in itself should logically tell someone that their evaluation of what they thought they were thinking is incorrect.
What do you think?
You would think.
Please, Buddy and I were talking about this before the class began. Please understand, these people were geniuses. They were very, very, very bright. And a lot of people followed them just because they were so incredibly bright. But the problem with bright people is, and I had 2 of them in my stores that were incredibly bright, but jerks. The problem with intelligent people is they can formulate the truth and reality in their own mind that is completely divorced from the world outside of themselves, and they can rationally come to terms with it inside of here because they're so bright. But they're dealing with thousands. I had one guy who was the brightest guy I ever worked with in my store. I think his IQ was 165 or 170, something like that. But he lied to get into triad root trad as an electrical engineer making microwave transformers back in the 70s. He lied that he was an electrical engineer. He never went to college. He got hired because he could say the language. He didn't have a clue what he was doing. After 6 months, they picked him out. But he gained a great income for those 6 months. And he went on to lie somewhere. It's that guy, Catch Me If You Can guy. Yeah. Just so bright they can create a world inside their own head that has nothing to do with the outside world. And they can go a long ways. These guys were like that. Thoughts, questions, comments?
I think
Buddy.
most of these guys, not all of them, and particularly right now we're talking about Rousseau, they're looking in a mirror and they're seeing the problem with humans, and they're seeing it in themselves, and they're trying to figure out a way to not have to accept that responsibility. Like, Yeah, it's only the societal government systems, religious, that corrupts humans. They're made up of humans. So it's just a twisted circle that they just keep spinning around.
And please understand that as we make our way here in the next half hour through the rest of these guys, it becomes easier and easier to divorce God from the whole system because of these guys thinking, keep pushing God further and further and farther away from the reality. Okay, Ted.
It kind of sounds like Adam. They want to blame somebody else.
Oh, that's exactly what's going on. And God is the one who holds them ultimately accountable. And so in Darwin's mind, and in Rousseau's mind, and in Freud's mind, and in Skinner's mind, and in Sartre's mind, and in Nietzsche's mind, if they can shove God out of the picture, they're free to do what they want. In fact, there's several of these intellectuals, these philosophers that have said they're deeply indebted to Darwin because now they can intellectually have a satisfying way of approaching their own existence that doesn't have to account for God.
Sure they do.
Yeah. Okay, going ahead. Charles Darwin, he looks at us as an animal. This is the middle of page 22. Man is a naked ape, the only creature that uses artificial covering. Please understand that the minute you take God out of the equation of our creation, the telos is gone. Lacey's shaking her head because I know she knows what telos means. What does telos mean? What's the Greek word? It means what? You never took Greek. The end or purpose or meaning or the end of it all. When Jesus died on the cross, he said, telos teraktamai, or something like that. It is finished. I've accomplished it. The cross has come to its full meaning. So if you always want to know what the teleology or the telos is of something, that's the reason why it exists, why it's there. The minute Darwin comes in and people accept that, the teleology, the telos for humankind is gone. Why? There is no purpose. There is no meaning for humans. Why?
There's no
end.
end.
Well,
Yeah?
corrupt end.
Well,
I mean, if you look at Darwinism, then it's not about an end. It's about just going on, trying to survive in a world.
and how do we go on and on in Darwin's worldview?
Survival of the fittest.
Survival of the fittest, which has all happened by chance. No purpose, no meaning, no thought into your existence at all. You're a product of slime that happened to come together and made you out of pure chance. If your origin is insignificant and your destiny is insignificant, the end of your life is insignificant, Keller says, have the courage and the guts to admit that your life now is insignificant. And if you buy into Darwinism, folks, we're going to find out that even love is meaningless. Dreams are meaningless. Passions are meaningless. Hopes and dreams, everything we do is meaningless. Thoughts.
Yes.
So that's why we sit around smoking pot and
Whoa! Whoa!
life is meaningless.
Listen, it's why my generation went to Woodstock. To try to find meaning and purpose in a generation that had been shoving it down their throats. You're nothing but a product of primordial slime. And then we've got I believe the current generation is starting to buy into it even more and more and more. And that's why the suicide rate is skyrocketing. Because they're coming to terms with their own meaninglessness. There's too many nesses in there. Outside of God. So let's go on. Karl Marx. Whoa. What can you tell me about Marx? What was his whole premise?
He's still working on us.
Pardon me? Somebody said it.
I said he's still working on us.
Oh, listen. All the current social issues have some type of foot in Marxism. So what did he promote? What was his whole premise?
There's an oppressor and there's an oppressed.
Good. There's an oppressor and there's an oppressed. And the oppressors is the bourgeois, the elite, the property owners, the business owners, factory owners, and the oppressed is the factory worker. So what did he call for?
Revolution.
Yeah, revolution on the part of who?
The workers.
The workers, the oppressed, to take over the bourgeois, to take over the factory owners, the property owners, and allow everything to be owned by who?
Everyone.
Everyone. That way you don't have greed.
Well, and paper.
Hang on.
It never works.
Save that thought.
It fails.
You don't have class rivalry. You don't have any of those things. In Marx's mind, all we had to do was eliminate classes, allow everybody to be on the same status, allow everybody to be everybody to be equal, and life will be perfect. How's that working for us? What kind of red flag should go up in the mind of every Christian when that kind of worldview is promoted?
Because you're assuming that will eliminate sin.
Ah!
Desires.
That's exactly what it's assuming.
But
Marx failed to account for our own inherent sinfulness. He assumed that the problems came from the bourgeois, from the elite, oppressing the common worker. That is not the case. The problem is inside of every one of us. But Marx could not see that. The whole woke thing, I don't know how much you know about it, but a lot of the delegates have come across that if you're white and male, you're an oppressor. You need to be overrun by those that are oppressed, and allow the black and the minorities and the females to take over, because if you're a white male, you're automatically an oppressor. Automatically.
Can't that have something to do with the past?
Oh, sure!
Because the males were always in charge of everything. Women couldn't own anything, you couldn't vote, you couldn't do anything.
Oh, the good old days.
The good old days.
Listen, Phyllis is exactly right. The problem is that they've looked at the past, dominated by white males, looked at the problems of the past, and translated the problems of the past to the present without taking account that things have changed over the last 300 years.
Yeah, if you take him as being honest.
Well, but that's...
There's so much dishonesty built into all of this.
Absolutely.
It's unreal.
Absolutely.
Because there still has to be an elite class. There still has to be a worker class. And then there are the less thans that need to be taken care of. You never achieve equity. You never achieve equality, let alone equity.
Boy, we're going to talk a lot about human equity about 8 chapters from now, because folks, it's a mirage. Listen, I am not equal to Sharon Thompson or Doug Thompson or any one of you. In all sorts of ways, you are superior to me, but in some ways, I'm superior to you. Nobody's equal. What we need to come to terms with is that we're all created unique in God's image, and we need to allow everybody to thrive and prosper in their area, and allow that to be valued at every area. But unfortunately, that is being obscured big time in our current culture. Thoughts before we go on?
I think we need to be careful, though, as Christians, that we don't label anybody. Like, I see it a lot. We label people as woke and immediately discount them.
Sure.
Whenever they bring up any issue that
Sure.
could be culturally sensitive, just because somebody sees something that's wrong and brings it up doesn't make them woke and doesn't mean that we should discredit them.
Yeah, and folks, the woke movement happened as a result of problems because white males did stupid things in the past. Okay? I mean, this movement has energy and momentum because of sinful behaviors in the past that have caused them to have the positions that they have. But the church needs to hold to the position that we're all the problem. And that we need Jesus in order to become anything close to being able to value the person that stands before us and understand that they're creating God's likeness and image just like we are. Other thoughts?
Reading through this, it struck me that Marxism mirrors Christianity, like it's Satan's anti-Christian.
Oh my goodness. There are a lot of people, in fact, when I was growing up, there were people in my church, which was very, very conservative, that believed that Marxism was the ultimate goal for Christianity.
How do you get that?
Because of Acts chapter 2 through 4. They held all things in common.
Oh.
But how do we know that that's not, they didn't mean communism or socialism? How do we know that that's not what the New Testament meant because of the context?
Because it was their choice and not the government telling them they had.
How do we know that?
I mean, it says in the Bible that, like, Barnabas gave away all of his stuff away.
That's in chapter 4. And 2 through 4 is where we get this idea of Christian communism. But chapter 5 negates that. What happened in chapter 5?
And it says Sapphira.
Which?
They sold property, but then didn't give all of it, and then...
And what is Peter clear to tell them?
That they were lying to God.
It's your money,
it was
you
your
money,
money,
but you lied to God.
It's your money to do with as you want, as you choose. It's not communism where you put it all in a pot and somebody disperses it as they deem necessary, which, boy, I want to chase that rabbit, but I can't get it out of my head.
Can't legislate generosity.
The bigger issue is that Jesus himself, in the parable of the tenants that came to work in the vineyard, one of them came at 9 in the morning, one of them came at 8 at night, and they gave them all the same. And people said, wait, Jesus, we should be getting more. We worked all day. This person only worked an hour. How can you pay us all the same? And what does Jesus say?
They all
need the same.
It's mine to do with as I determine. Are you going to tell me I can't deal with my money as I determine? Listen, capitalism is not perfect, but I believe it's closest that we have to the biblical model of an economic system. Now that ought to open a can of worms, and we're not going to do much fishing, but...
Well, if you think about it, if God wanted everybody to be, if communism was God's plan, then God would have given us all the same gifts in the same amount, and he didn't.
Wow, Lacey, well put.
You know, we had a
Yeah, then we
little
wouldn't
children's
need the
story. It was
classes.
called Sir Abner's Grapes. Have you heard about that?
No.
It's a children's story, Sir Abner's Grapes.
Yeah, we
Sounds
had it.
familiar.
Yeah.
It was one arch book, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And different people came at different times to work, and they kept just like needing more and more. But in the end, they said because it takes this person just as much money to support his family as it does the person who started in the beginning.
Good. Good. We're moving on. Nietzsche, Sartre, all the existentialists. What do you know about existentialists?
Crazy.
They're crazy. They have some value. Just limited. Yeah, Fred.
Well, they're focused on the immediate and the now.
Good.
What you experience right at the moment.
What else do you know about existentialists? Lacey, you should be chiming in
They're
here.
kind of just like Ecclesiastes 1. They're just like meeting.
Oh, wow.
I was thinking that.
I know.
Well, I never put that together, but you're exactly right. The existentialists over the last 200 years are basically living out the book of Ecclesiastes without under heaven. I don't know if you've read Ecclesiastes carefully or not, but Solomon makes a distinction between that which is under heaven and that which is on earth. Or under earth, or what is it?
Under the sun.
Under the sun, thank you, that's what it is. Listen, under the sun is where the existentialists find themselves. Under heaven, they've completely allowed that to be divorced and shoved out of their lives. Because they believed over the last 200 years that God is dead. Nietzsche believes that he's no longer in existence and that humanity has killed God. And so we need to go on living our lives for the moment, even though the moment is meaningless. Because he's clear enough to recognize that if God is dead, we have no purpose. We have no meaning. We have no values. Because all of those things are transcendent in nature and given to us from above by God. And if there is no God, there's no values, there's no purpose, there's no meaning, there's no right or wrong. We can just do what we want. And so Nietzsche, Sartre, Bertrand Russell, all are from that same existentialist position. Sartre believed that existence precedes essence. Everything else in the world you create because there's a reason for it. You create a wheel because it's going on a car. You create lawnmowers because you're going to mow grass. Humans are created and they have to find their meaning. Their existence precedes their essence, what they're built for. Here's what he has to say.
Actually, he says we're not created, doesn't he?
Well, that's what he ultimately means.
We just exist.
We just exist, exactly. Here's the problem with that. And this is what he says, and think about that in regard to our current situation here in America. In order to have essence, in order to have purpose or meaning, you have to create it on your own. Where does that put us?
Modern day America.
How does it put us in modern day America? It's exactly where modern day America is. How so?
If I don't have the best house, if I don't have the best car, then my life is worthless.
There's some people that think that way.
I create my own reality.
I create my own reality so much so that...
You're on your own. Make it happen.
Make what happen?
Anything.
Anything! I'm a cat. So I'm going to live like a cat.
We'll put looking glasses in the head.
Even though I've got male genitalia, I'm going to live as a female. Because I want to be a female. I can't compete as a male, and so I'll just... Never mind. Thoughts!
I actually find it interesting tying this back to Nietzsche, because in Beyond Good and Evil, his whole introduction kind of said, it addresses how he believes Christianity forced people to be put in the box of nature, so they couldn't break out of that. So he believes the perfect person is someone who goes above his nature, who's the Uberman.
I'm so glad Lacey's here. I forgot a huge point when I was talking about Marx. Remember Marx's whole philosophy was there are oppressors and there are the oppressed. The oppressors are the bourgeois, the leaders, the government, the property owners, the church.
Even the middle class.
The church created, in Marx's mind, the church created the policies it created in order to keep the working class subdued. You need to submit to those governing authorities because they're ordained by God. Marx used to cringe at that, even though it's clearly stated in Scripture 3 different times. Because Marx saw that as just the elite pressing down Christianity. And folks, that's where Nietzsche picks up on it from Marx and from Darwin. And that's where a lot of the inertia has been created over the last 150 years. So that now, in our current culture, the current culture looks at the church as that which is oppressing people. They're oppressing us sexually. They're oppressing us economically. They're oppressing us in wanting to do what we want to do as humans. We should be free to create ourselves any way or create ourselves, but the church won't let us.
What's ironic about it, though, is they've become militant in doing what they want. You know, they don't want the church to tell them what to do, but I'm going to tell you what to do, and you better do it. And they're
so much so that who today is the real oppressor?
The oppressed class.
Huh? Who dictates to us that we can't say a word about race in a conversation? We can't say anything about... Listen, folks, this is going on the web, and my daughter and I had a texting conversation. My wife and I had a deep conversation about how do we even present this so it doesn't get eliminated. Who's being oppressed? Me or Facebook? Who totes the current party line? I would like to suggest that the whole thing's been flipped upside down, that the ones that were the oppressed are now the oppressors, and the whole thing's gonna have to blow up, because the whole premise upon which their worldview is built is that they have to be the oppressed ones. And they aren't. They've got government itself in the United States caving in. Our form, we filed for a renewal on our passport. What did the form say in the middle between male and female, baby?
Are you transing or transitioning?
Yeah. Are you currently transitioning? Transitioning.
Sex, male, female. Are you? And then the next question was, are you transitioning? So.
Thoughts.
Yes, on our way to heaven. Transitioning.
Reality and
I am not marking that box.
Okay, all right. Yeah.
Do you understand a little bit better how we've gotten into our current situation and the motivation behind it for the last 150 years that have put us in a position where people can say the crazy things that they say and say it with a straight face and conviction? Because they believe we need to make ourselves meaningful and purposeful. That we can't find it in God, He's dead. We can't find it in other people because that's being oppressed by their views. We need to find it within our own self and our own heart. And what does Scripture say about our own heart?
Deceitfully wicked.
It is listen, for 3 millennia, the wise thinkers knew that mankind should not look within in order to find purpose and meaning and direction, because it was capable of leading you in all sorts of crazy directions. But only in the last 50 years have we encouraged people to look at our hearts to find purpose, direction, and meaning and make the choices of our lives. Folks, if I followed my heart every single minute of every single day, I wouldn't be here right now. Why? Because I get spitting mad nervous getting in front of you all. And my heart's telling me, just leave. Let them come and get sick of you, and then you'll never come back, and then I'll be free. Every Friday night. But that's not what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm supposed to be here doing this class. I believe that with all my heart. Thoughts?
I'm sorry you don't like us.
I like it. I get nervous every time I public speak. Don't I, baby?
This might not go against them as much as I think it does, but their big thing, their big encouragement is to look inside us to find who we are. If it's in us, why do we have to look for it?
Ooh,
I mean,
interesting.
I think we
shouldn't
still
it be
understand.
self-evident?
I think we still understand we're infinite beings. So there is, well, not infinite beings, but we have eternity on our hearts. So there is a sense of us that we understand that there's so much we still need to grasp and we can't find it.
Do you understand why Lacey said that we have eternity in our hearts? Where's that come from?
God-shaped hole in everybody.
Pardon me?
God-shaped hole in everybody.
Yeah, where's it come from though?
Ecclesiastes 3:11. It's one of my
so
favorite
nice to have you in
verses.
this class. It's from the book of Ecclesiastes. It's part of the God image that's stamped into us. The writer of Ecclesiastes says it's eternity stamped in our hearts. It's what Blaise Pascal said that all of us recognize and at the same time know that we don't have, which makes us miserable. But if you have faith in Christ, your faith will allow you to believe you have it and override that misery. But that's chapter 18. Other thoughts, other questions before we go on?
Paul states it too, "O wretched man that I am, who will save me from this body of death?"
Absolutely. And as I have been into several different groups, as I've met with them, if the Apostle Paul can say that at a time writing the book of Romans, at the spiritual level that the Apostle Paul was at, right in the book of Romans, that he can say that, who are we to say that we're above that?
Amen.
Folks, that's lunacy.
I think though, going back to the flip-flopping of who's being oppressed and oppressors,
Sure.
that we gotta stop being so shocked by it, because Jesus said it was gonna happen.
Absolutely.
And so like everybody gets all bent out of shape about it, but Jesus said it was gonna happen. Like, he has to fight back or whatever, but like, don't be shocked. Like,
That's the purpose of this whole class, is that you don't have to be stunned and go, what is happening? You can have a better scriptural understanding of what's happening. And we're going to look at a lot of the scriptures and a lot of the reasons why I believe a lot of the current culture is the way that it is. And it should encourage us, not make us shocked, but should encourage us to say, God said this all along. Why don't believe it? I should believe it. And realize that this is going to happen. Other thoughts? Need to keep moving, otherwise we'll not get done, and that would be horrible. Sigmund Freud, what do you know about Freud?
Pervert.
He was a pervert, that's true. Tried to give a rational scientific explanation for all of his sexual perversions. What else do you know about Sigmund Freud? That is huge in today's thinking.
Our lives are predetermined by our prior experience.
Exactly, that you do not have free choice, that your environment and your upbringing and your education have all predetermined how you're going to make choices.
But how did we make those early choices to have those experiences?
Not only that, but what does that do to human responsibility if in fact we're not accountable for anything? Yes. I'll never forget sitting at the Ford dealership in Brooklyn, Michigan. We were at Addison at the time. I was getting my car fixed, and I read either Time or Newsweek. To this day, wish I would have taken that magazine out of the office and stole it. Ask them for permission to buy it. But I read an article in which leading psychologists and physiologists had gotten together and agreed that there was in the mind of certain criminals certain brain formations, a certain way of processing information that predetermined they were going to be a thief, predetermined that they were going to be a murderer, predetermined that they were going to be a liar. And that people had no choice at all in the matter. They were predetermined and pre-programmed to be a murderer. We needed to just go ahead and let them go. They were going to, the ones that had the other brain way that was connected were going to be predetermined thieves. We needed to just accept that and say that they're thieves. Thoughts?
It's called the sin nature.
Folks, what happens to society when you surrender to that?
What we're seeing today.
Yes!
You become machines.
We got criminals getting let out of jail all over the place by left-leaning judges.
There's several towns out in California, my understanding, several towns in California, that unless you steal over $1,000 worth of goods, they won't even pursue legal prosecution for you.
I think it's $1,900.
Is it that much now?
In some,
I think it's the whole state.
Yeah. That's where they're dropping off the illegal immigrants in the shopping centers.
Oh my goodness. Folks, let's go on. Other thoughts about Freud? B.F. Skinner went even further. He said, and well, let's go ahead and read what this says. Someone under B.F. Skinner, page 30, the first quote there, give me a...
Dozen?
Yep.
Okay. Give me a dozen healthy infants, well formed in my own specified world to bring them up in, and I'll guarantee to take any one at random and train him to become any kind of specialist I might select. Doctor, lawyer, artist, merchant, chief, and yes, even beggar, man, and thief, regardless of his talents, perchance, abilities, vocations, and race of his ancestors.
What's he saying?
I'm God.
Whoa! I hadn't put that together, but you're right, Rob.
What do you say?
I'm God. What else is he saying?
Anybody can be anything.
Anybody can be anything. What else is he saying?
There's no free will in choosing it.
Good. They don't have a free will in choosing any of it. What else is he saying?
Man is so predictable that I can change his environment to be anything.
Good. Man is so flexible and predictable that I can make him anything I want to make him. Is there people that believe that today?
Well, they're transitioning, we don't know.
Oh, shit.
Good.
My 9-year-old thinks he can be a Power Ranger when he grows up.
I'm sorry?
That my 9-year-old thinks he can be a Power Ranger when he grows up.
You know, this is really interesting. My wife was watching a commercial the other day in which like an 8-year-old or something like that was dressed up as a dinosaur and playing out and that kind of stuff. And my wife says, I wonder if a psychologist got a hold of him, he could try to convince him that he could have DNA, dinosaur DNA implanted in him, and he really could become a dinosaur.
Wow.
Now, as ludicrous as that sounds, it's a short step from where we are.
How does AI play into this?
Oh, it plays in huge! Because in these people thinking, there is no difference. Folks, you do realize there are legislatures currently debating whether AI should be given legal rights as humans.
No.
Yes. Yes. Because they can so imitate human behaviors, they can so imitate human reasoning, that's wrong, calculating, that they think that they become human at the point where they have these capabilities and should be given rights. It's basically B.F. Skinner on steroids.
We're already at the point where using technology, you don't know when you see what looks like a person being videotaped live giving a presentation, if that is them or if it is AI. Right.
That is exactly right.
And you can, and how will we ever know if what's there, if they are saying something that we think is a lie, how are we going to know if it's the person that said it, or if it's one of their enemies that made them look like this?
Like that person. Folks, this is a huge issue in our current culture. You lost touch with the nursing homes. There are a lot of nursing homes that are employing AI robots to dialogue with their residents. I have a book by Sherry Turkle that's 10 years old. So this is old technology. It's called Alone Together, if you want to research that. But 10 years ago, there were AI robots that were programmed to carry on conversations with residents at nursing homes because
nobody else will talk to them.
And they'll talk until the batteries wear out. And they're also programmed to do this. While the other person's talking, the robot goes, What did that robot just do?
Reinforce their talking.
Exactly. Invite the person into their world and say, I'm really interested in what you have to say. These robots are programmed to and they also have access to the internet. And so when a person says something, they can resource that event and say, were you there and on the 50-yard line when the guy went out of bounds and hit the cameraman and killed the cameraman? Yeah, how did you know that? Oh, what was it like to see that happen? They can carry on conversations that we would be helpless to carry on because they have the whole world of information to bring to that conversation.
Maybe if we want to combat that, we should get our heads out of our own butts and go visit the people in the nursing home.
That's exactly why it was created to begin with, because we got our heads in our butts not visiting our people in our nursing homes.
I've worked in a nursing home, and if you have 20 patients, you cannot spend that much individual time with them.
Sure.
If you get 10 patients.
That's because in our society, athletes
Even
and
five
singers
patients.
make millions of dollars.
Oh, wow.
And nursery care workers get
But even so, it
somewhat
shouldn't be the
livable.
the nursing home care people that are the ones that are expected of this. It should be the church.
Right.
It shouldn't be the nursing home.
Or family.
Well, yeah, but not all of them come from Christian
Sure.
families, so you can't
True.
hold them to that standard.
Sure. Folks, if that's true 10 years ago,
Yeah.
and listen, AI has creeped into areas that you wouldn't believe. Even to the point of making them lovers who will do anything you ask them to do.
You're doing that in Japan right now.
Oh my goodness.
Data.
Oh, it's Data, what, even more so, because Data looked like a robot. These AI characters don't look like robots. They look like humans. And they have texture, they can wrinkle their eyes up when they squint. I mean, it's incredible, the technology that's available right now. And listen, Jan's exactly right. It's going to make confusing what's real and what's not real, not only for our nursing home residents when they're talking to somebody, but for all sorts of issues in life.
Politics. You have no idea what you're.
There's not an area of life that won't be affected.
Maybe Hobbes was partially right.
I think Hobbes was onto something. I don't know, how many of you are familiar with Christopher Parkening, classical guitarist? Really, really big about 20 years ago. Christopher Parkening was a machine. He played classical guitar and never made an error and always did it exactly like it was written. It was just flawless playing. Now, robots can be programmed to play that exactly like Christopher Parkening. Thoughts?
They're using AI to clean up iconic recordings of classic songs.
Really?
In different genres, but they've been going through doing it in classic rock quite a bit, and they're doing other genres too. But I heard a Beatles song earlier today that obviously has been touched up, and it was horrific. It was a sweet love song, and it was so clean, so precise, so crisp.
Where did you hear something like that? Where'd you hear
I
it?
stumbled across that one on YouTube, but
Wow.
Jan?
This reminds me of years ago when they started being able to make artificial flowers look so real that we got to the point that we really, as society, would actually prefer the artificial because it didn't have imperfections in it. And that seems like that can very much parallel what we may be having.
Absolutely. In fact, the book that I researched, Sherry Turkle's book, Alone Together, 10 years ago, the nursing home residents preferred the robots over family members. Because family members were like this all the time and busy and sometimes not really engaged and not listening. Robot never was not engaged. The robot was always taking everything that they said and running through their grid and trying to keep the conversation going. So much so that the residents in engaging with the robot actually got annoyed when family members showed up.
So this is,
Go ahead, and then Jody, and then Ted.
so this is still all in, God knows everything. God knew this was coming. God's how can that be? Well, I guess it doesn't necessarily need to be honoring to God, but God's been,
I want to come back to that question.
Yeah.
Yeah, hang on, make sure I address that before we leave.
Okay.
Jody.
Well, the thing that's most disturbing about what you just said there is that then we're just encouraging all of us to become more selfish because then we don't need people. It's more convenient to be on our own because then we can have whatever we want and we don't need others, and that's not the way why we were created.
Hang on to your thought, Jan. I'm going to come back to that. Ted.
I was just wondering if maybe that same line of thought is the reason that children would prefer video games over playing with other children.
And children's toys are created the same way. There's a toy called a furry that Furby does basically the same thing, right?
You teach it to talk to you. You teach it.
Yep, that's right. Yep. I'm going to come back to yours, Jan. Don't lose your thought, okay?
Okay.
Go ahead.
So my favorite quote in the world goes back to what Jody was saying about how being alone, and it's from Harry Potter, and it's the one I sent you. And she said, like, Harry's all worried about being alone and nobody believing him, and she's like, if I were who, I'd want you to feel alone, because if you're all alone, you're not that much of a threat. And,
oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
It's a spiritual warfare.
Oh my goodness. That's incredibly insightful. Fred, I don't remember the conversation we had a while back about, what was it about? I can't remember now, but that applies. Jan, what was it you said?
Okay, and how can God look at this whole AI thing? And God knows everything? Did God permit this? Did God?
Here's what I really believe with all my heart is going on with why God's allowing this to happen. And first of all, we were designed and created to do these kind of things. It's our mission in life to look at the world and take dominion over it and to push it as far as we can push it. But it was always with the understanding that we'll glorify God in it.
Right.
We're not. Okay? And so I think it'll ultimately be our demise. But here's what I think is really, really important for this class and for us as Christians to recognize. There is a huge difference between AI robots and real-life human beings. What is it?
Your spirit.
Exactly. You have a spirit. Now, AI can mimic and what's the word I'm looking for? Fake and fallacious. Parrot the fruit of the Spirit. But we have the real thing. What is the fruit of the Spirit? Love, joy, peace, patience, goodness, kindness, gentleness, faithfulness, self-control. Those things are what make us distinctively human. Robots can imitate it. They have incredible patience. They can go until their batteries run out. But they can't show what is real patience because they don't have anything else to do other than what they're programmed to do. And they're only capable of doing what humans put into them. We're capable of generating all sorts of things that are outside of what we've been inputted. And the fruit of the Spirit is what makes us uniquely human. Don't ever forget that.
I think the fear that these AIs are real close to being able to actually take over their own control themselves, and so the people that have put stuff into them, they're afraid at this point that the robot, it's like Frankenstein, he's going to turn on the creator, and the guy that created him can't stop him.
Well, there's more than one movie that has exploited that whole theme.
Yeah.
I think, Jan, you were also asking though, what's God's role in AI? Could it maybe be, you want meat, I'll give you meat. You'll have so much of it, it'll come out your noses.
Oh my goodness.
You want what? What was it?
The reference to numbers that the people complain for meat.
Oh, yes.
And God says, you want meat? I'll give you all the meat you want. It's coming out your nose. So,
you want to be your own God?
Yeah. And that, I really believe, we're going to seriously take a look at that a lot of times through through the course of the study is that God, I think, is ultimately turning us over to our own demise, because he basically said that you divorce me, you want to get away from me, I'll let you go. Just see where that takes you.
The thing about having an artificial relationship, though, is it's artificial. I mean, that same robot that is so, wants to converse with you all day long, you give it to another person and it will act the exact same way. So it's like it's cheating on you. You know, you would feel like it doesn't really.
Oh, baby, that's incredible, great insight.
You know, that's when you realize, you're like you have a boyfriend and you realize he cheated on you. You'll betrayed even if he could still keep acting the same way.
Wow.
It's not the same.
That's an incredibly rich insight. Yeah, exactly.
And I don't buy anything into the AI, because just from my own personal experiences seeing things that AI generated, you can just see the shallowness. Like, I know that once in the Collegian, there's an example between an actual freshman paper writing on about the good and Aristotle and all the good stuff of Hillsdale College, and then an AI generated by ChatGPT to compare. But within the first 5 words, everyone could tell the AI won, because they're like, yeah, that's like the most baseline thing that we expect anyone to see. It's not personal. Like, you can tell that there's no depth inside of it.
Lacey's hit the nerve again. What does it say about our culture that we're satisfied with superficial performances? Yes! I think it's an example of the shallowness of our relationships, the shallowness of our existence, the shallowness of our thinking, the shallowness of our worldviews, that we're content with all this. Ted?
I'm afraid that when AI gets to the point where it can sit in power, that people would prefer it over the politicians that we have now. It'll just be more logical and less emotional, and people will just be ready to say, okay, well, let's have this AI run for president instead of one of these jokers.
Yeah, that may very well be a possibility.
Saddest thing is there's a lot of truth in it.
Yeah. Let's look at the conclusion, page 31. Someone read that quote that says, "One thing seems common to all."
One thing seems common to all human beings: a passion for significance. I've never met anyone who wanted to be insignificant. Everyone wants to count, to know that what he or she does each day isn't simply a means of making a living, but a living of making meaning. The happiest people of all may well be those who go to the jobs they hate because they need the money.
Thoughts on that quote?
It's true.
Next one underneath it, someone read that one. Our modern consumerist age.
Our modern consumerist age is deluded to think that life consists of meeting our animal needs: eating, drinking, money, power, sex, and leisure. Charles Millick, at one time Undersecretary General of the United Nations, saw how badly this missed the real human need. In arguing for the inclusion of freedom of conscience and religion in the UN's original Commission on Human Rights, he said, "All those who stress the elemental economic rights and needs of man are for the most part impressed by his sheer animal existence. This is materialism, whatever else it may be called. But unless man's proper nature, unless his mind and spirit are brought out, set apart, protected, and promoted, the struggle for human rights is a sham and a mockery."
Wow, that's an incredible statement. Thoughts? You all understand what materialism is. It's basically a worldview that there's nothing outside of that which you can touch, feel, smell, taste, see. And I'm going to beat into your head between now and a year from now that what makes us distinctively human is the fruit of the Spirit. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, self-control. There's probably one other in there I think I missed. Thoughts? Someone read that one on the bottom 39, 31, top of 32.
If people are not made in the image of God, the pessimistic, realistic humanist is right. The human race is indeed an abnormal wart on the smooth face of a silent and meaningless universe. In this setting, abortion, infanticide, and euthanasia, including the killing of mentally deranged criminals, the severely handicapped, or the elderly who are an economic burden, are completely logical. Any person can be obliterated for what society at one moment thinks of as its own social or economic good. Without the Bible and without the revelation in Christ, which is only told to us in the Bible, there is nothing to stand between us and our children and the eventual acceptance of the monstrous inhumanities of the age.
You think he's right? How do you know he's right?
We just see that.
How can we see that?
Well, history. We've seen it in history already.
Where have we seen it in history? Holocaust. Listen, folks. Adolf Hitler was fully immersed in Darwin and Freud and Nietzsche and Sartre. Fully immersed. He made everybody in leadership in Nazi Germany read Thus Spake Zarathustra, which was Nietzsche's treatise on what it meant to be fully human. The will to power. What makes you authentically human is for you to have the power to pursue whatever you want to pursue. Whatever is in your way, obliterate it. Did Hitler live that out? Mm-hmm. Absolutely. He was not an abnormal, weirdo, lunatic. Well, he was. But he wasn't as far out there as what people thought he was. He was just a product of his age. Unfortunately, he believed everything he'd been taught in the universities. And he just acted upon it.
Wow, that seems to be kind of similar to what we're dealing with.
Exactly. And I think we're going to see all sorts of atrocities like this because we're gearing up for believing the same things all over again. As a culture. Mm-hmm. Folks, he wasn't an abnormal leader that just popped up out of nowhere. He enjoyed unbelievable support until the ugly truth came out too late. He got voted in by huge majorities. Thoughts?
Well, if I remember it, he was a very average student and a pretty average soldier until he caught fire with this and really bought in 100%.
And what was attractive about what Adolf Hitler presented to Germany at that time?
Because it was during the Great Depression and he promised them prosperity.
And what else is Germany coming out of? And a war just before World War I. What was Germany's status in both those wars?
Oh, they
lost.
The preeminent country in the planet.
Well, they were going into the war, but what happened in both of the wars?
They lost.
They got their butt kicked.
So he offered them national pride.
Ah! We are Germans. I know we've been defeated. I know our economy's in shambles. I know our students are not getting the education they need. I know our society and our culture is really, really bad right now, but I can take you to the promised land. And folks, in a lot of ways he did. He made life economically prosperous for him. He did put them on the map as far as superiority. There was no better education you could get than what you could get in Germany in the late 30s. Which is huge because there's people still today thinking that education is what all we have to do is bring education to our culture and everything would be hunky-dory. Nazi Germany proved that to be wrong. Thoughts before we dismiss? You guys have been unusually quiet.
You turned off the clocks.
I turned off a fox? Oh!
What's up every 15?
My wife said that I should turn them off, so I turned them off.
Well, I have a question.
Yes.
I was waiting for me.
Freud didn't seem to think that, or seemed to feel as though we had no free will, right?
Yes.
How can he explain children going against what their parents want them to do?
Because in Freud's mind, they've been exposed to other children that have done this, and they've watched the success of those other children in going against their parents, and so they're just imitating what they've seen from other children.
Oh, sometimes that can be true.
Yeah, oh, listen! Every one of these guys has an element of truth to them. Please understand that. That's what makes them so dangerous. When I took philosophy in seminary, I just ate that up. I really ate it up. Because I realized, and Buddy and I were talking about this earlier, that if they just would have seen Jesus, everything they were looking for in their philosophical system would have come true. Listen, Marx was right. Workers are alienated from their work. We're alienated as humans from nature. We're alienated from God. Alienation was the whole thing that promoted Marx to say that the oppressed needs to, because they're alienated from the oppressor, needs to just have a violent revolution against the oppressor so they're no longer alienated, we're all equal. He's right, we are alienated, but his solution is absolutely hideous. And if you follow history at all, wherever Marxism and socialism and communism have been employed, it's not made people free and promoted human rights. It's absolutely destroyed human rights. Because they failed to take into account the sinfulness of every one of us, and there's no accounting for that in their system, and it just becomes a different oppressor. Other thoughts before we dismiss?
Ultimately, it's spiritual warfare, and they listen to the demons whispering in their ears rather than looking to God and His wisdom.
Wow, that's good. That's good. Yes?
Would you speak a little more about communist countries?
Oh boy.
And where you say, they don't work. Well, we, as living in a free country, I know they won't work, but I don't know why they don't work. Speak more to that, please.
Because they're trying to make everybody equal, try to allow the state to run everything because the state is there. Folks, the state can't run itself. How can it run the rest of the country? And the more we surrender our lives to the state, the more it's going to be irresponsible with taking control of those things that we surrender to it. One of the things that happened with my brother-in-law, Jay Weissong, you may know him. He has a roommate that was from Moody Bible Institute that was a farmer in Zimbabwe. The state took over the farms in Zimbabwe. What they used to produce in 180-acre corn and what they used to be able to take to market, and everybody was fed well because they were able to produce a lot. Now those same farms produce 40 and 50 and 60 bushels per acre, and they get it harvested and it doesn't make it to market because the guy that was supposed to deliver it never showed up. Why not give individual control to the people that have a vested interest in making sure that those things are taken care of, rather than giving control to the state that doesn't give a rip whether it takes care of it or not, because they're already being taken care of because they're in control of everything. Mm-hmm. You've got to allow the individual to have a skin in the game. And communism takes the skin out of the game.
Okay, now, in Egypt, did Joseph let the people have skin in the game, or did he make them give the crops to them?
Yeah,
well, their own good.
Yeah. I'm not sure long term what happened. Well, no, even after Egypt took control of the land, they were in charge of their own crops and only needed to give a percentage back to Egypt. So they still had it's basically us and taxes.
But it says, by the end of Genesis, it says that they owned nothing, that Pharaoh owned the whole land because they didn't
No, Pharaoh did own it, but they still had the ability to produce crops on their own and could keep a percentage of those crops and turn over a percentage to Egypt. I'm pretty sure that's what took place.
Yeah.
Do you mind if I make a
Yeah, go ahead.
counterpoint? I try to be careful here because I don't want to offend you, but I think you legitimized the communist countries that we've seen pop up and go down the drain by saying they want to create equal outcomes.
Sure.
They say they want
Yeah.
to, but there has never been a single attempt to actually make that happen. It's all manipulation of the power structure, and who's in the power structure will do and say whatever they have to do and say to get people to go along enough that they can just grab all the power.
That's the problem with communism. You still have
No
people.
honesty.
Yeah, you still have people in control, and unless the people in control have their hearts redeemed, doesn't matter if it's capitalism or communism or fascism or what it is, you're going to have problems. One of the really fascinating studies, I'm going to get guys out of here. One of the fascinating studies I had in seminary was church government. There's 3 types of church government: congregational, Episcopal, and Presbyterian church governments. There's only 3. The Bible gives hints to all 3. But the problem is that all 3 work great if the leaders are godly. And all 3 are absolute disaster if the leaders are not godly. So it really doesn't matter if you're a congregational form of government or Episcopal form of government, which is what Free Methodism is, or a Presbyterian form of government. If the leaders are godly, it'll thrive. If the leaders are not godly, it's a disaster. And I really believe that economic countries and the form of government that we have is a lot the same. If the leaders are godly, communism could work. But the problem is they take no account for the sinful nature. There is absolutely, God in communist and socialist nations is excluded. And so they can't take account for that. But until you do, you're going to have problems. Thoughts on the study, thoughts before we meet next Friday at the fireside room at the church, 7 o'clock.
Is it the next chapter?
Yes, chapter 2. And we may even get chapter 2 done next week. No, we won't. Never mind. I just realized what all of it is. Other thoughts before we dismiss?
Thank you.
Someone willing to pray for us as we go? James, buddy.
Lord, thank you so much for allowing us to gather here. Lord, this study is very timely, and you know the times we live in. Our society is getting more and more contentious with Christians. And we don't have to fear right now to gather in your name and to study your word and to study this particular material. But the time may soon be upon us. So I pray, Lord, that we would greatly appreciate this opportunity that we have and make the most of it. And Lord, let us not leave unchanged when we gather together in your name and study how you want us to be and how you want this world to be. Lord, help us to keep our eyes always on what's next. This is not our home. We belong here because you have work for us to do. But our time's coming where we will spend eternity with you. And there's a world full of people right now, Lord, that don't have that promise. And pray that we would learn enough in this study that we would more effectively reach more of them. And I pray that you would be with us as we leave, and Lord, that you would strengthen our fellowship. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you all.